If you're somebody who's out there still doubting Kirby Smart with his track record over his time at the University of Georgia, I just don't know what to tell you. We're going to talk about that and a lot more on this edition of the How About That DAWGSCAST. And we're going to begin with the big breaking news that kind of shook college football this last week. It wasn't just a Georgia story. It was a national story. It was a 5-star quarterback who made his decision about where he was going to come play football for the next 3 to 4 years. His name was Jared Curtis, and the answer was Athens, Georgia. That was great news for the University of Georgia. It was a national story because the team that he was also considering was the Oregon Ducks. They have deep, deep pockets, much like Ohio State, much like the University of Texas, who we learned recently is spending somewhere in the neighborhood of $40 million to build out their roster for the 2025 season. And there were a lot of people who were beginning to wonder out loud, is Georgia going to be the same kind of recruiting machine that they have been under Kirby Smart, given this new era? Think back to last year. Much like Jared Curtis, there was a high-profile 5-star top-rated player who everybody thought might choose Georgia. Everybody thought they were in good position with him. But in the end, he didn't choose Georgia. He chose the Texas Longhorns. He showed up wearing a red and black suit. Everything had pointed to the fact that he was going to be a Bulldog. And then money was the deciding factor, and he decided to sign with the Texas Longhorns. And when that happened, people really started to say, well, maybe Georgia's stepping back. You even heard the most prominent voices on the SEC network this week say that the SEC runs through Texas somehow. Are you kidding me? Listen, Peter, Chris Doering, met them, shook their hands. We've had conversations. They're good dudes. It's talking season, y'all. It's talking season. And Chris and Peter knew exactly what they were doing. Georgia's slipping. The SEC runs through Texas. Never mind the fact, that's well documented here on this channel, that those Texas Longhorns are not 1, but 2-time losers to the Georgia Bulldogs. In both situations, Texas had the advantage. The first time, their home stadium. Stomped a mud hole in them, walked it dry. Then they rolled into Atlanta. Everybody was picking the Longhorns again. Georgia was beat up. How did they even get there? And then in the game, they lose their starting quarterback. They're down to the mighty Longhorns. And yeah, all they did was come back and whip them again. Listen, it's talking season. Chris and Peter knew exactly what they were doing. They're trying to gin up conversation. We're not that far from June. We're not that far from July and SEC Media Days. That's what you do in the offseason, and it's fine, but it doesn't change the reality. The SEC doesn't run through Texas, but because of those deep pockets, people seem to think, well, that's the trend. It's all about money. That's where this thing's going to go. Texas is going to, win more battles than they're going to lose in the recruiting wars, and much like Ohio State did last year, they're going to flex their pocketbooks and they're going to hope that makes up for the difference. That's going to be enough to win for them. Meanwhile, you have Kirby Smart, record of excellence, back-to-back national champion, multiple SEC championships, 9 consecutive years, finishing with a top 3 recruiting class. He's just hanging out over here, doing what Kirby Smart does. And then when Jared Curtis decided he had an announcement to make, that announcement came out red and black. He was Georgia Bulldog. Forget Phil Knight and the Nike money out at Oregon. It was about development. It was about proximity to home. NIL was a part of that deal. Make no mistake, this is a 5-star quarterback. It's always a big deal when a 5-star commits anywhere. But it's a different level of deal when it's a 5-star quarterback. And make no mistake, NIL was going to be a factor here for Jared Curtis. And the fact that he chose Georgia paired with those other things, well, that tells you something. It doesn't tell you everything, but it allows you to infer a few things. And that is that nothing has changed baseline when it comes to Kirby Smart. King of roster management in college football, king recruiter in college football, and he will always pursue the top talent, regardless of where they are in the country, and try to add them to his roster. You can take that to the bank. That is not up for dispute, negotiation. There is no wiggle room. It doesn't matter who you are or what position you play. If Kirby Smart thinks he can make his roster better, he's going to go get that dude that he believes can do that. Take it to the bank. Well, that philosophy, paired with what we now know about the fact that Curtis chose to be a Bulldog, knowing that NIL was going to be a factor in his decision, knowing that Oregon probably had a bigger number on the table just because of their pockets, knowing what happened last year to Texas and Georgia with the Justice Terry situation. People started to wonder, but now we know. Now we know that Georgia and Kirby Smart came out on top in this battle for the premier recruit in any cycle. That would be the number 1 rated quarterback, the 5-star player, the franchise guy, the guy that has literally been compared to Josh Allen and John Elway with his arm strength, and, oh yeah, Matthew Stafford. When Curtis made his commitment to the University of Georgia, that gave Georgia their first overall number 1 quarterback commitment since Matthew Stafford committed to Mike Bobo and Coach Richt way back in the early 2000s. Now, Jared Curtis is that next guy. The common denominator here, I'll say it again, Mike Bobo. The thing about Bobo in this whole situation is that there are people who are just never going to be happy with anything he does. That's fine. Take that, put it in your back pocket, and walk away with it. Because for the people who actually have skin in the game, they actually make their money doing this kind of stuff, that they actually have careers dependent on the choices they make. When you look across the country, there's a vastly different perception of Mike Bobo than there is among some in the Georgia fan base and some in the SEC fan base, teams who think they know something about him. I'm not here to argue that point, really. I'm not here to carry water for him. I'm just pointing out a fact that when it comes to recruiting players based on whether or not he can coach them up and develop them and get them to the league as the overall number 1 draft pick in the NFL draft, that's Mike Bobo. So he did it again. So now Georgia's got that feather in their cap. Jared Curtis is in the fold. And as he said on the day that he made his announcement, now he's going to become this recruiter for Georgia, the lead guy. So when we look at what does this mean, how does the commitment of Jared Curtis to the University of Georgia, how does it change Georgia football recruiting? Well, I just told you. It allows us to infer that Georgia is, when it comes to NIL, a real player. And in a cycle like 2026, when you've got top-tier talent, number 1 rated players on the board that are all interested in Georgia, there are going to have to be things that come together in terms of donation and NIL and all those sorts of things to make it happen, right? To lock down that class. There's just no two ways around it. Jared Curtis is no different. We knew NIL was going to be a factor, but we also now know that Georgia is a player for real when it comes to getting not one, but multiple top-tier players in each class. That is the number 1 thing I take away from this. The number 2 thing I take away from it, people might be concerned. They already have Gunnar Stockton coming back. You expect him to be QB1 this fall. You have Ryan Puglisi, who many people can't wait to see, and Ryan deserves his opportunity, no doubt. Then you've got the Montgomery kid, who was coming off an injury last year, who could have played anywhere in the country. Everybody wanted him, and he came to Athens too. They already have 4 scholarship quarterbacks in Athens, and now Jared Curtis is there. So there are a lot of people immediately who are like, oh, well, transfer portal, nobody's going to stick around. Either Curtis is going to go because he doesn't want to wait, or you're going to lose Puglisi, or you're going to lose Montgomery, or you're going to lose somebody. Okay. Think back to what I said first. Kirby Smart will always build competition into his rooms at the University of Georgia. The program, everything about it is built on competition. It's like Puglisi said when he chose to come, I know I'm going to have to compete wherever I go. Fantastic. He's got the right mindset to get this thing done. Gunnar Stockton is a gamer. He's going to have every opportunity to show everything that he is this fall. Does he decide to come back for a second year, or does he go to the league? That's going to matter in the end. Does that, let's say he leaves. Now, does that put Puglisi in the front runner seat? Well, then you're going to have Jared Curtis on campus. He's going to take his shot. You're going to have a healthy Montgomery there. You're going to think he's going to take his shot. It doesn't matter. You can't worry about who might leave if you're going to pursue the top players in the country every year in high school. You just can't do it. We've seen it in the past. Jamon Dumas Johnson had to move on. He felt like he wasn't going to play as much because of the guys that had been recruited behind him. And he has still got a wonderful relationship with the University of Georgia, Glenn Schumann, Kirby Smart. No hard feelings. That's just the name of the game. In that way, as much as any other, people want to compare college football to the NFL. Well, in that way, that's exactly what it is. You show up, you perform, and if you get beat out, then you get beat out. That's what the transfer portal is there. Take your talent somewhere else. No harm, no foul. Thank you for everything you did for the University of Georgia. So when Jared Curtis decided to sign, he believes with everything in him that he's going to be able to come in and compete. Awesome. I hope he does. I believe he'll be given every chance to do that. But he's still got to learn the playbook. He's still got to do all the things that any other player has to do. So there's no guarantee he's going to walk in and beat out whoever happens to be the supposed number one at that time. He may, but you can't just say that's going to happen. So NIL, Georgia's a player. Transfer portal, who cares? Competition is king at the University of Georgia. So what else happened? What else changed with Curtis' commitment to the University of Georgia? It has to be the ripple effects from the splash that a five-star commitment makes, a five-star quarterback makes in any cycle. If you looked at the class rankings prior to Curtis's announcement, Georgia was somewhere in the teens, like 17, 15, 17, depending on who you're looking at. Curtis announces, commits to Georgia. Immediately, they jump into the top 10 for class recruiting rankings. Who cares about the rankings? Those are mythical. What happens once you get this guy on campus is that the other top players decide, hey, that's where that cat went. Elite wants to play with elite. He's going to need protection. He's going to need weapons. He's going to need help to make that offense go. And they start thinking like this. And they start thinking, man, Georgia won before because they stacked talent. I think I'm going to join this class too. I'm a five-star. I'm a number one guy at my position. I'm going to jump in this class too. We're going to stack some talent. And we're going to go win some trophies. That's the way this thing goes. So the ripple effects are now going to start to radiate out from Athens, Georgia. All you have to do is look at what's happening this weekend. Jackson Cantwell, the number one rated offensive tackle in the country, pushed his commitment date back. He was originally going to commit prior to Curtis. He pushed his commitment date back. Curtis commits to the Dogs. Cantwell was going to take another trip to Athens. Well, Curtis gets wind of the fact that Cantwell's going to be in Athens, and he's like, oh, guess who else is going to be in Athens? This guy, the five-star quarterback that just committed to the University of Georgia, and I'm going to go let him know I want him to come with me. Who knows how much weight that carries? Each of these players have to make their own decision. NIL, when you're talking about these top players, is an absolute factor. At the end of the day, we can't say for certain, but it sure doesn't hurt to have your flagship guy make a special trip to come down and talk to you to recruit you to come play with him. So the ripple effects are just starting. But there's much, much more that can happen on the other side of that, on the other side of this commitment from Curtis. Because like I said, Cantwell, his commitment date is coming up here in just a few days. And there's going to be another big spotlight when he makes his announcement. Wait. I'll get right back to the show. But I want to take this opportunity to let you know about the Ring the Bell newsletter. Each week, I break down the mindset, strategy, and culture behind Georgia's football dominance. But of course, that's not all. You'll also get exclusive podcast updates and episodes. You'll get deep dives about Kirby Smart and Georgia football, real-world lessons on leadership, content strategy, and growth, stories from the sidelines and the press box, and first looks at new content, free resources, and community drops. Not to mention my top hitters on social media every week. And oh yeah, there's the discounts. So are you in? Be the first to know. Be a part of the team. Join the program and sign up for the Ring the Bell newsletter in the description down below. This is not just a newsletter. It's a movement for dogs who lead. Talking about Jackson Cantwell, I just mentioned that he's going to be in Athens again this week. Again, because much like Jared Curtis, much like some of these other names we're going to talk about this evening, he has been to Athens a lot. He is very familiar with who and what the Georgia Bulldogs are under Kirby Smart. The fact that Jared Curtis is deciding he's going to come on down and hang out with him for the next 2 or 3 days, as we get toward the end of the week here. Well, that is just all for the better. Because again, if you get these guys down there hanging out and talking together, I understand that anything can change last minute in this world of NIL. But these are the kinds of players who, so far in the process, have not shown a propensity to want to engage in the spotlight, in the theatrics, in the I'm going to drag this thing into the fall and keep everybody waiting side of it. They are a little recruiting weary to hear them talk about it. So when you've got these guys and you know that they've already started with a field of 30, 40 offers, and now they're down to their final 2 or their final 4, they're really serious about it. So immediately you have people out there when Jared Curtis commits and they're like, well, he's going to leave. You know, don't worry. He's going to jump ship. Listen, it might happen, but that's the name of the game in college football today. It is as good as it can be right now for the University of Georgia. You've got the kid committed for the second time. Now Jackson Cantwell is right there, and he's another one of those guys that is kind of done with the process. I firmly believe that when they make their commitment, that's going to be the end of it for these guys. Cantwell, Curtis, that's who I'm talking about specifically. And I think that Georgia could have some good news. Now, Miami is on record as saying they're going to do everything they can to keep Jackson Cantwell out of Athens, Georgia. Okay, take your best shot. But the one thing we know that much like with Curtis and his family and the connection to Mike Bobo and the coaching staff, Jackson Cantwell has that same level of connection and rapport with Coach Stacy Searles. They know everything they need to know about one another. At this point, it's just pulling the trigger. And if Georgia is, in fact, a player when it comes to NIL, which I believe they are, then, well, everything else will sort itself out. In that, Jackson will have the opportunity to come back to Athens one final time, not to learn anything new, but to make sure he's clear on where Georgia stacks up in the NIL race. I believe they're going to be right there. And if all things are equal, you factor in family relationships with the coaches, proximity, so on and so forth, looks like Jackson Cantwell could be a Georgia Bulldog. That would give the Dogs 2 recent 5-star commitments. And now this class is really picking up some momentum as we head into the fall, because where we're headed from here, I mentioned ripples earlier. Yes, you have ripples across specific positions, but let's run through the fact that the Dogs went from being outside the top 10 in the overall recruiting rankings for this class to now being solidly in the middle of the top 10. And they're just getting started. You don't worry about where Kirby Smart and his recruiting is in May. You don't worry about where it is in April. You really don't even worry about where it is in June. By the time July gets here, though, generally speaking, they're putting this thing to bed, and Georgia has made their move. And right now, across the board, there is not a school who is ringing them up the way the University of Georgia seems to be. Let's walk through it. I'm not just making this up. I can point to a few names. Tyler Atkinson is the #1 rated linebacker in the country, right in Georgia's backyard over in Grayson. If anybody's been to Athens more than Jared Curtis or more than Jackson Cantwell, it's going to be Tyler Atkinson. He doesn't need to learn anything else about the University of Georgia. He's been there so many times, he's intimately familiar with the way the practices are run, the facilities, the city of Athens. He knows the level of expectation from the coaches. He also knows that Georgia, under Glenn Schumann and Kirby Smart, have a history and a track record of producing Butkus Award winners at the linebacker position, first-round NFL draft picks at the linebacker position. I mean, the resume clearly speaks for itself. We also know that Atkinson has already signed at least one mega brand deal before he's even stepped foot on a college campus, so we know that NIL is going to be a factor when he makes his final college decision. With that said, we also know that Georgia is a player in that space. They fully understand how important it would be to keep a player of Atkinson's caliber that is growing up in their backyard home to play for the Dogs, and Georgia will do what they need to do to be competitive in that space. You stack that alongside the fact that Georgia can produce NFL linebackers at a rate that no other college program is producing them right now, and I have to believe that the University of Georgia is in good shape to land Tyler Atkinson at the end of the day. This cat right here, Mark Bowman, out of Modern Day out in California, some people think he's the next Brock Bowers. Now listen, that's the first time I've said those words, because for me, Brock Bowers is that guy who can be on any Mount Rushmore discussion. He can be on any greatest of all time discussion at the University of Georgia. He could be on any statue list at the University of Georgia. That's who Brock Bowers was, okay? I'm not saying that's who this guy is, but the country sees him and they're like, oh, wait, he looks a lot like that 19 that played at the University of Georgia. He ranks as the number 2 tight end in the country, another 5-star, and a lot of people believe Georgia leads for him. If you're curious about why would he come across the country, well, wait a minute. If Georgia's known for anything more than linebacker play in recent memory, it would be the tight end play at the University of Georgia. First-round draft pick after first-round draft pick, slaying it in the league. That's what those guys are doing. Bowman sees this. Oh, Nate Frazier? Yeah, he went to Modern Day. He seems to be doing fine in Athens. Brock Bowers, he came from California. He seemed to do just fine in Athens. I think I might head over to Athens. We'll see. We'll see. But that is yet another huge piece to this recruiting class that is still on the table. Still on the table for what's going on here in this recruiting class for the University of Georgia. And he's not alone. He's not alone. KAIDEN PROTHRO from right here in the state of Georgia, down in Bowman. A lot of people thought this cat might be the number 1 tight end in the country. Now, we're splitting hairs, but the rankings I was looking to build this list tonight, this is another 5-star player, the number 3 tight end in the country. That's right. I just said there are 2 5-star tight ends that the University of Georgia is in good shape with as we move through this recruiting class. Not 1, 2. And they both can end up wearing the red and black. I'll tell you what, Hartley is just killing it in that tight end room. Kirby Smart and the tight ends killing it on the recruiting trail. I said it earlier. If you doubt that Kirby Smart has lost his fastball, if you think he can't still get up there and do it with the best of them when it comes to high school recruiting, you're mistaken. I don't know what to tell you because you just don't have your goggles on. You're just not watching because Kirby Smart's making it happen. We're not done. Jared Curtis is coming in. He's working on getting Jackson Cantwell to protect his blind side. He's going to be trying to get these tight ends to come in there and help him move the chains. Weapons all over the field. Let's add another. How about an elite running back with at least one recruiting service having him as a 5-star player? SAVION Hyder. Number 1 running back in the country. 5-star player considering the University of Georgia. You think Jared Curtis isn't going to pick up the phone and say, hey, can we hook up? When you going to be in Athens? I would love to get to know you better. I want to put up some points in a couple of years. Of course he will. Of course he will. And people forget about it. I mean, we talk about Georgia these days being linebacker U with good reason, and we talk about them being tight end U with good reason. Let's not forget that they've been RBU since forever. That's why Nate Frazier wanted to come out here in the first place. SAVION Hyder, considering Georgia. But he's not the only one. He's not the only one. There was another player, name of DERREK Cooper, who Georgia had committed at one point for a hot minute this last summer. He backed off that. Fair enough. Fair enough. He was just, that was going into his junior year. That's fine. But DERREK Cooper just has continued to be a fantastic player. Depending on where you look in the rankings, he's a blue chip guy, a 4-star guy, potentially a 5-star guy. Currently ranked as the number 2 or 3 running back in the country. Got Georgia right there. Already committed to the Dogs once. You know he likes what he sees up here. You know he knows about RBU. Yeah, Kirby Smart has not lost his fastball. And I'm just talking about the offensive guys because Jared Curtis is the ringleader in this discussion. But there are plenty of defensive players, top tier blue chip players who are still on the board for the University of Georgia. So if you care about the mythical rankings, if you are concerned about whether or not Georgia is ranked high enough right now in May in those rankings, don't be. There is plenty of meat left on the bone for Kirby Smart and the boys when it comes to recruiting in this 2026 class as they try to put a button on it and lock everything down here by the time we get down to signing day in December. A lot of people talk about this part of the year as being a dead season, but I understand there's a lot of talking going on, just like the guys over on the SEC network. But there's also a lot of work being done right now. And between now and the end of July, Georgia is going to fill the coffers with not just players, but blue chip players. And hopefully a lot of the ones that we just talked about here tonight are going to be among them. Kirby Smart and the Georgia Bulldogs still have an opportunity in front of them to rack up their 10th consecutive top 3 recruiting class. That is unheard of. This is Kirby Smart's 10th season in Athens. When you talk about this metric, Kirby's batting 1,000. Jared Curtis is just the latest. And you say, how can one commitment change Georgia football recruiting? At the core of it, it doesn't change it. As I said earlier, Kirby Smart's always going to go after the top talent in the country wherever they are. He is going to improve his roster at every given opportunity. That will not change. Not this year, not next year, not ever. As long as Kirby Smart is the head coach at the University of Georgia, that will be the #1 priority. With that said, when you get Jared Curtis in there and you understand everything that had to go into the glamour of the pick, the 5-star quarterback in the NIL era, a kid who took a Lamborghini, I think it was, to his high school prom. When you're talking about that kind of a guy, and you know that NIL is a factor, and you know that he could go anywhere he wanted to, and you know that there are teams out there who like to talk about how much money they've got when it comes to NIL, and then you see Georgia step up and get that commitment, it says something. It changes something. If it doesn't change it, at least it changes perception. It lets you know that Georgia is a player in the NIL area. It lets you know that when it comes to the transfer portal, Georgia don't care. You come in, you compete, and if you're good enough, you play. If you're not, best of luck to you if you choose to move on. Those two things seem to be more solid, foundationally speaking, after this commitment than they ever have been. And then, of course, there are all the ripple effects that come off of a commitment, like a Jared Curtis, like potentially a Jackson Cantwell, like potentially a Tyler Atkinson. So when it comes to who and what Kirby Smart and Georgia football are, nothing has changed. They are who they are. And if you thought that they were leaving anytime soon, then Kirby and I have some news for you. You are sadly mistaken. Go Dogs!
Told them, how about them fucking dogs? That's what I told them.